How's it going, everyone? This is Dan for BladeReviews.com. Welcome to my review of the Fallkniven A1, a stout fixed blade knife made in Japan for Swedish knife company Fallkniven. And it's a beautiful knife. I've really enjoyed it. I've got a lot to say, so let's just get into it. I've got some very quick specifications for you first. The A1 has an overall length of 11 inches. It's got a 6.3 inch long blade, and the weight is 12 ounces. So it's, like I said, a medium-sized knife. It's got some real heft to it, though. I really like that a lot. Anyhow, I do have a couple size comparisons. So here is the A1 next to a Cold Steel SRK, which is very similar in size and also in design to the A1, kind of interesting. And here is a Fallkniven F1 for comparison as well. An entirely different knife, but kind of interesting to see them side by side like that. So let's get these other knives off the table and take a closer look at our blade on the A1. And the first thing that caught my eyes is beautiful satin finish. Fallkniven does offer this with a black coating as well. For me, I just like shiny things, I guess. I went with a satin finish, and it's held up really well. But our blade shape is just a conventional drop point. You've got a little bit of a swedge going on here. You've got a partial flat grind that blends into a convex edge here. So it's a zero ground edge, meaning there's no secondary bevel. It just goes right into a convex edge. So very interesting. We'll get into the performance of this edge in a moment, but I wanted to share some other features of the blade with you first. So yeah, satin finish, drop point, swedge. It's also quite thick. You're looking at a 6mm thick blade here that's just under 1/4 of an inch. Very beefy, adds a nice pleasant heft to the knife. I know it's not going to be for everybody. If you're especially weight conscious, it might not make the cut, but if you need something very strong, maybe to get a variety of stuff done, this is a welcome addition to a knife of this size. I like having something that's got some real meat behind it. So anyhow, let's talk about the steel briefly. What we've got is actually a laminate steel, so you've got 3 pieces of steel all stuck together like a sandwich, and your outer layers are 420J stainless steel, and your core, your cutting edge, is actually VG10, which is a Japanese stainless steel. I'm sure a lot of people watching the video are going to be very familiar with VG10 already. It's common on a lot of EDC knives like Spyderco's, Dragonfly, Endura, Delica, etc. It's also quite common on Japanese kitchen cutlery, so chef's knives, paring knives, etc. It's a good choice for that sort of thing because it can get very, very sharp, and it sharpens easily, holds a nice edge. For me, it was a little curious almost to see an outdoor knife come with VG10, especially one that's so stout and overbuilt. I had my concerns at first, so because I'm used to really tough steels like 1095 high carbon, 1085. And I just didn't know how VG10 would perform in the kind of intended use that this knife has been built for. So, well, what I did was I cut with it extensively and tried to gain an appreciation for exactly what the A1 was all about. Now, unfortunately, I didn't take it up into any mountains or traverse the icy fjords of Sweden with it or anything like that. I was just kind of messing around with it in my backyard. I live in a suburban part of South Florida, but I did do quite a bit of cutting with it. I had some downed tree branches to hack on. I also had some 2x4s and cardboard and stuff to help test and evaluate the performance of the A1. So I'll just tell you what I did. I started off with a downed limb, and I was just chopping off the branches. Some of these branches were maybe an inch thick, and some were much smaller. And I was seeing how the A1 stacked up, how it would chop. And it's not an incredibly forward heavy knife. It's not like a kukri or an axe or anything, but it's got this great weight to it, and you can get some good chopping done if you need to. I wouldn't use this as a dedicated chopper. I think there's better tools for that, but for all-around use, if you need to do a little bit of chopping, the A1 is definitely going to get the job done for you. So I quite enjoyed doing that with it. I actually just really enjoyed cutting with this thing in general. I moved on to some hard carving or maybe some sort of chop carving. I was going through some 2x4s and branches and stuff, and whenever I would meet a knot, I would just kind of hack through it, you know, instead of going around it or whatever. I was sort of putting some little chops into it as well, and it would just bulldoze through anything that I put it up against. It really, really impressive how well this knife cut. I think it's all due to the geometry. You've got this convex grind, which is very strong, but it's also capable of getting extremely sharp, and it has a very nice fine edge, and it just goes through wood like it's not even there. Really very, very impressive, and just a joy to cut with. So after that, I did move on to a little bit of batoning, and I thought that would be an interesting test, and some people are big fans of it, so what the heck, I did a little bit. Again, unfortunately, I didn't have any massive logs or anything like that to baton through, but the stuff I did have was no challenge at all for the A1. I think it's actually very well suited for the task of batoning. You've got that partial flat grind, and what happens is once your wood that you're batoning through hits the flat of the blade, it just pops it open. Really impressive to see how easy it was to split open pieces of wood with the A1. Phenomenal knife if you're interested in batoning at all. Finally, I did just kind of an edge retention test, a little bit of slicing on some cardboard, and again, I was really impressed with the way the A1 cut. It's a phenomenal slicer, kind of surprising since it's such a thick piece of steel here. You know, again, 6 millimeters thick, but it's all in the grind. It's got a fantastic grind, nice and thin, but plenty of strength to it. Zipped through cardboard like it wasn't even there. I will say that the VG10 was extremely sharp through all my wood cutting. It did dull after going through all that cardboard though. By the end of it, I needed to touch it up, and what I did was I just stropped it, and it was very easy to bring the A1 back to an extremely sharp working edge. So very impressed with it. Had no issues with chipping, cracking, bending, or anything like that. So I know that's a concern for some people. You know, they still think VG10, maybe it's not up to the task that something like 1095 would be. I would beg to differ. If you're careful with this knife, if you avoid chopping around rocks, if you don't baton it over sand or areas that have a lot of rocks in it, you're going to be fine, at least in my experience. And guys, I've chipped out 1095, I've chipped out 1085. It's all in your technique. You just got to be careful. Rock versus the fine edge of a knife, well, the rock's usually going to win. So you just got to be a little bit careful with your technique, and I think the A1 will treat you really well. Very, very impressed with the blade and the performance. So let's take a closer look at the handle here. What you've got is actually a Kraton handle, so that's a high density rubber, and it's got a great feel to it. I think Kraton was a nice choice. It's got a little bit of give, it absorbs shock, but it also has this nice tackiness to it. It's got a little bit of a sticky feel almost, and it helps keep the knife in your hands, especially if you're a sweaty guy like me. My palms get really sweaty really quick when I'm working, and I didn't have any issues with the knife slipping out of my hand or anything like that. That said, they did install a lanyard hole, which would probably be smart to use. You do have the tang protruding through here, so you can hammer with it, and it's a very just strong and stout design. The handle's nice and thick, really fills the hand well. There is a little bit of texture here, a nice little diamond texture on the sides, but it was still very comfortable. I had no issues with hot spots or anything like that. Just a really comfortable, really simple handle that gets the job done. You know, good size. Again, I take a larger glove, and I didn't have any issues with the size of this handle or the way it felt. Just really impressed. Let's take a closer look at the sheath here, and this is actually the Fallkniven A1Z, and Z stands for Zytel. So mine actually came with this Zytel or plastic sheath, and I gotta be completely honest with you guys. Next to the knife, I really wasn't super impressed with the sheath. Now, don't get me wrong, it's entirely adequate. If you're just trying to get the knife from A to B, you'll get there. It'll be fine. It's actually a very nice and lightweight sheath. Totally works. But the features on it aren't really there. It's not like a super feature-rich knife, or excuse me, feature-rich sheath. And it felt kind of flimsy next to the knife, but I guess if you're trying to save weight, it would be perfect. Let's just run through it real quick. You do have a little strap down here, or a slot for a strap, or maybe some cordage. You do have a drainage hole in here. It's hard to see, but it's in there. You got the Zytel or plastic sheath. It's not super thick. It's kind of thin and flimsy, again, compared to this really stout knife. And you do have your belt loop here. It's permanently attached. It's not a quick release belt loop, so you're going to have to take your belt off if you want to take the sheath on or off, which is you know, kind of a pain. I'd rather see it with some sort of quick release strap on here. You do have a simple snap closure, and you know, that's pretty much it for the sheath. As far as retention and stuff goes in with a little snap. There's a slight amount of rattle, nothing to be concerned about. The retention of the snap is very good. Holds the knife in place. You could theoretically mount this upside down if you wanted. It's kind of a heavy knife, so I don't know if I would carry it like that, but you know, you're welcome to carry it however you want. And the retention's good. There is a little thumb ramp here, and it's a friction fit sheath, like they all are, but you can see here it's got this interesting little friction element that pops up. So it's very simple, gets the job done. But next to the this rugged overbuilt knife, I just don't feel like the quality or the overbuilt nature is quite there. But hey, there's a very robust aftermarket for Fallkniven sheaths. So if you want to get some sort of aftermarket Kydex sheath, you can do that. I know they also make a very nice leather sheath for the A1, so that's something to consider too. So that pretty much takes us through all the features. All things considered, I really like the A1 a lot. It's just a beautifully made knife, and the cutting performance is phenomenal. I cannot stress that enough. It was an absolute joy to work with this knife. It was really quite fun, and the performance was extremely impressive. Very low maintenance as well, since it is stainless steel, and that convex edge was surprisingly easy to keep extremely sharp. That's a nice thing about VG10 is it sharpens very easily. And the handle, comfortable, very nicely done. Just a super rugged knife. It's definitely a keeper in my book, and I would recommend it if you're interested in this knife. So there you go, guys. That's the review. Once again, this is Dan for BladeReviews.com. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you have any comments or questions, and feel free to check out the full written review with pictures if you want to check out a full written review with pictures. Thanks again, guys.